Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We are on Ayah 145 of Surah Al-Baqarah, and the context is still about the direction of the Salah. قال الله تعالى: وَلَئِنْ أَتَيْتَ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ بِكُلِّ آيَةٍ مَا تَبِعُوا قِبْلَتَكَ وَمَا أَنْتَ بِتَابِعٍ قِبْلَتَهُمْ وَمَا بَعْضُهُمْ بِتَابِعٍ قِبْلَةَ بَعْضٍ وَلَئِنِ اتَّبَعْتَ أَهْوَاءَهُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَكَ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ إِنَّكَ إِذًا لَمِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. He says وَلَئِنْ. He could have just said وَإِنْ, meaning if you brought them every ayah, every sign. But there is a lam there, وَلَئِنْ. This is the lam of qasam. So what it represents is Allah taking an oath. It's like He's saying, وَعِزَّتِي, by my honor, if you brought the people of the book every sign, they will not follow your qibla. So it's the lam of qasam. Just one letter to replace a whole oath. So if you brought the Ahlul Kitab every ayah meaning sign, they would not follow your qibla, meaning they will not face the Kaaba in the Salah. And He says, and you will not follow their qibla. So that is to say, you will not imitate them. And He also goes on to say that the Jews will not follow the qibla of the Christians, and the Christians will not follow the qibla of the Jews. It has been said that the Christians would face towards the east, and the Jews would obviously face towards Bayt al-Maqdis. But the point is that there is difference and ikhtilaf even between the Ahlul Kitab. And then we see the word wala'in again. If you ittaba'ta, follow, ahwa, plural of hawa, desires. If you follow their desires, in other words, their deen is desires. After the ilm, the knowledge has come to you, so the ilm refers to the Quran and also the other revelation as well from the inspirations of the hadith. Then indeed, in that case, you would be from the zalimeen. And we have spoken about the word zulm before. We ask the question here, is it then possible for the Prophet to follow their desires? The answer is no. Of course, Allah Jalla wa Ala is going to protect the Prophet from doing such a thing. But what Allah Jalla wa Ala is doing here is that He's speaking hypothetically. If you were to hypothetically follow them, you would be from the zalimeen. Now the Prophet is protected from that, but we are not. So the rule practically does apply to us, even though practically the rule does not apply to the Prophet, because he is ma'soom and protected from such a thing. So this part of the ayah, even though it is hypothetical, it still does have a practical benefit with respects to us. Okay, so reflecting on this ayah, what might we take? We may take that the Prophet was extremely eager for the Ahlul Kitab to be guided to the deen of Al-Islam, and he would want to show them any ayah possible to guide them, except that Allah Jalla wa Ala gives the Prophet a reality check. He tells him essentially, yes, you may be eager to guide them. However, the reality is that even if you brought them every single ayah, it would be no use. Now one may ask the question, is the qibla of those who follow Musa alayhi salam Baytul Maqdis? Well, what Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah says is that the Kaaba was the qibla of all the prophets, including Musa alayhi salam. And it was not Bayt al-Maqdis. So it was not Jerusalem, and it was not Al-Masjid al-Aqsa. And the evidence is in Surah Al-Imran, إِنَّ أَوَّلَ بَيْتٍ وُضِعَ لِلنَّاسِ لَلَّذِي بِبَكَّةَ مُبَارَكًا وَهُدًى لِلْعَالَمِينَ. The first house, meaning house of worship, house of Allah, to be built was at Bakkah, which is another name for Makkah. It was blessed and a guidance for mankind, not just for the Arab, not just for the Ummah of the Prophets, but for the whole of mankind. So this was built before the Prophet's time, and we discussed this issue earlier on. But it was the Yahud and Nasara, the people themselves, after the Prophets, who changed the Qibla. We also take that it is haram to imitate the kuffar in those matters which are emblematic to them, such as their qibla, and that the Prophet will never in future, in his life that is, follow the Qibla of the Kuffar, because Allah Jalla wa Ala makes a declarative statement that you will not follow their Qibla. It's not a command form, it is a declaration. We find the disunity amongst the Jews and the Christians, and from the disunity is that they do not follow each other's Qibla. The Qibla of the Yahud is in Jerusalem towards some kind of a sacred rock that they have, and the Qibla of the Christians, at least in those days anyway, was towards the east. We also learn that the deen of the kuffar, including the Yahud and Nasara, is hawa, is their desires, because Allah says if you follow their desires. He did not say if you follow their deen, but He's referring to their deen. So it means their deen is their desires, which is hawa. Now linguistically, hawa does mean to fall, as in to fall down, and it's used for desires because when you desire something you fall towards that thing that you're desiring. Many times the word hawa is used in the negative sense. It can be used in the positive sense as well, as in, for example, فَاجْعَلْ أَفْئِدَةً مِّنَ النَّاسِ تَهْوِي إِلَيْهِمْ وَارْزُقْهُمْ مِنَ الثَّمَرَاتِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَشْكُرُونَ. So make the hearts of the people tahwi, desirous towards them, meaning the family of Ibrahim alayhi salam, who were left in Mecca. But when used in the negative sense, the opposite of hawa is huda, guidance. We also find that when knowledge comes to you, then you have no excuse in committing sin or following the kuffar. Yes, it's true that a person may follow the kuffar or commit sins if knowledge does not reach him. Such a person is misguided, true, but he's not taken to account for it, and we cannot call him a zalim. We can call him misguided or a dal, but we cannot call him a zalim. But when knowledge comes to him and still he persists in this sin, then we can call him a dal, a misguided one, and we can also call him a zalim. We can pick up a subtle point of etiquette here, how Allah Jalla wa Ala addresses the Prophet. He says if you were to follow their desires, you would be from the zalimin. He does not say you would be a zalim. So he does not isolate the Prophet with zulm. He says you would be from the zalimin, meaning there are many such zalimin and you would be from them. This is a lot more gentle than isolating the Prophet with zulm by saying you would be a zalim. So Allah Jalla wa Ala addresses the Prophet softly. It's an amazingly subtle point, but it can make a massive difference to somebody's feelings. When Allah Jalla wa Ala rebukes the Prophet when he turned away from Abdullah ibn Maktoum, Allah Jalla wa Ala says, Abasa wa tawalla. He frowned and he turned away. But Allah Jalla wa Ala is talking about the Prophet. Why did Allah then not say, Abasta wa tawallayta? You frowned and you turned away. Because the latter style is much more personal against the Prophet, and that would be harsher on the Prophet's feelings. But what Allah does is that He eases up on His rebuke and uses the third person. Sure, He goes on to address the Prophet in the second person, but He begins in the third person sense, because this is much more easy and softer on a person's feelings. So it's a fascinating point to pick up on how Allah Jalla wa Ala uses certain etiquettes in His speech. We learn also that proper knowledge is the knowledge of the deen, because He says after the knowledge comes to you, the knowledge, meaning the ultimate knowledge worth seeking. Why is this an important point? Because nowadays we find people are infatuated with dunyawi knowledge and knowledge of science. So they talk about the Enlightenment era and so on, where the knowledge of science flourished. However, the real enlightenment is the era of the Prophet. The real golden age of Islam was the first 3 generations of this ummah. We may also take that righteousness is determined by actions, not by anything else. Because if Allah says to the Prophet that you would be from the Zalimeen if you followed their Qibla, then this applies more so to anyone else. If they followed their Qibla, that is the Qibla of the Kuffar, they will be from the Zalimeen. So this dhulm is linked to your actions, not to who you actually are, or where you were born, or where you live, your status in society. It's all down to the actions. They are the only thing which determine who you are and what you are. It's just that many people have this mentality that if somebody comes from a noble lineage, he is automatically better than others. And this is not the correct Islamic way of thinking. Okay, let's take ayah number 146. الذين آتيناهم الكتاب يعرفونه كما يعرفون أبناءهم وإن فريقا منهم ليكتمون الحق وهم يعلمون. He says يعرفونه, they know him or recognize him. Him, who is him? The Prophet ﷺ. Just as they يعرفون, recognize أبناءهم. Abna, plural of ibn, meaning sons. So they recognize the Prophet because of the description in their own scriptures, just as they recognize their own sons. Okay, what about their daughters? Well, of course, daughters are included in this, but the word sons is used because normally sons are more beloved to the parents than daughters. And he says, indeed, a fariq amongst them, fariq meaning a group. La yaktumun, from kitman, conceal, al-haq, the truth, wa hum ya'lamun, and they know exactly what they are doing. Ayah 147, al-haqqu min rabbik, fala takunanna min al-mumtarin. The word Rabb we have spoken about before. Mumtarin, from imtira, meaning to doubt. So do not be of those who doubt. Okay, but doubting what? Doubting that this Quran is from Allah and that the millah of Islam is the haqq. Okay, so what might we pick up from these two ayat? Well, we can pick up the obvious lesson. The Prophet is well known to the Ahlul Kitab. He is described in their scriptures. We also find from Surat Al-Fath that even the companions are described in their scriptures. And previously we discussed that even the Kaaba is mentioned in their scriptures, that the last prophet is going to face the Kaaba. What excuse can you have after this? When you recognize the Prophet just as you recognize your own sons, the most beloved people to you. In Surah Al-A'raf, ayah 157, we have corroborating evidence of this, where Allah says, الَّذِينَ يَتَّبِعُونَ الرَّسُولَ النَّبِيَّ الْأُمِّيَّ الَّذِي يَجِدُونَهُ مَكْتُوبًا عِنْدَهُمْ فِي التَّوْرَاةِ وَالْإِنْجِيلِ. Al-ayah. He is written in the Torah and the Injil. We also pick up that Allah is being fair. He says a fariq, a group amongst them, conceal this knowledge of the Prophet in their scriptures. So not every one of them does it. From them, there are those who have integrity to Allah and the Messenger, such as Abdullah ibn Salam and a few others. So the lesson to be learned is, even against your enemies, you've got to be fair and just, and not to be skewed. Rather, be balanced during all times and places. We also find when he says, Al-haqqu min rabbik, the truth is from your Rabb, this is the rububiyyah khasa, the rububiyyah in which Allah Jalla wa Ala helps his servant to victory. This is specific to prophets and also those who follow the prophets and aim to give victory to the deen of the prophets. Notice how he says, فَلَا تَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْمُمْتَرِينَ. You must not be from the doubters. Notice the noon shadda, which is the noon of tawqeed, of emphasis. One might ask, is it even possible for the Prophet to doubt? The answer is no. Allah Jalla wa Ala will protect him from that. But sometimes when Allah gives orders, it is not to initiate an action, it is to continue an action. So the difference between initiation and continuation. So the Prophet is not in doubt, that is clear enough, and Allah is ordering him to continue to not be in doubt. So the order is for continuation, not initiation. Initiation would be that you are in doubt and then you begin not to be in doubt. We may also take that doubt negates your iman, because Allah has given a specific order not to be in doubt. So if anyone is in doubt about this deen, then such a person is not a mu'min. And what we mean by doubt is a genuine ideological doubt. We are not talking about whispers of shaitan which want to make you doubt and put doubtful ideas in your mind. No, that is different. That is wasawis, and we need not pay any attention to wasawis. We are talking about ideological doubts, such as the one that the Yahud and Nasara have and the Kuffar have. They have an ideological doubt. It's much more than a simple whisper. As for the wasawis, then no one is safe from this. Even the companions were not safe from this. And finally, we can take how much care Allah Jalla wa Ala gives to keeping the Prophet firm. Let's not forget that he was under constant attack by enemies, be it physical attack or ideological attack. So such a person must be kept firm. Otherwise, the Prophet is a human being. It's entirely possible that he caves in to pressure and he caves into the attack. That's why these types of ayat which keep the Prophet firm are absolutely necessary. Wallahu a'lam.